Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, the journey to becoming a conscious man, hosted by Milvo. Hey all, welcome to episode 2 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. For all of you who have listened to episode 1 and have decided to listen in again, welcome back. If this is your first time listening in, then welcome aboard, as I take you on a journey of becoming a conscious man in today's society. To all of you who have provided your encouragement, support and feedback, thank you. It means a lot to me and I'm extremely grateful. Please feel free to leave comments and also hit the subscribe button so you can stay notified of when the next episode is being released. I can also be reached on all key social media sites being Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. Just simply search for The Unearthed Man. Now, before we get into today's episode, here is a preview of episode 3 with the transformational coach, Blaze Grinner.
The first thing I feel I got addicted to was alcohol from a very young age, maybe 15, 16. Playing a lot of rugby league, I really excelled. So I was around like full-grown adult men at a really young age. And part of that male bonding, especially in Australia, was involved around alcohol. And the more that I could drink, the more props I got. And so I created this persona of this party boy that would just be binge drinking. And really deep down, I was just seeking validation and love.
Blaze and I discuss addictions and how they can detract from you as a person. How we also explore how, when you have that addictive personality trait, how you can actually turn it into being something positive and quite an ally for you, and you can actually rechannel that energy. So make sure you tune in next week as we discuss everything about addictions. Now, on to today's episode. Today's episode is a challenging one because it's actually about myself and about my journey so far. And there's been a lot that has happened along the way. So I feel it's really important that if I'm going to run a podcast and have other men coming in, opening up about their stories and their journeys, that it's really important that I set the scene up front and I have a willingness to open up about my stories, my challenges, my addictions, and what has got me to this place, and also all the emotions and feelings and thoughts that I've actually had a way that no one, my wife, my family, my school friends, there'll be a lot of stuff I'll talk about today that a lot of people wouldn't even be aware of and wouldn't know of. So this will be pretty raw on the way through. If I do get emotional on the way through, I will leave this in the podcast because I feel that that is very important as we go. So I'm not sure how this episode will go, but I'm willing to go there. I think the thing is, it's just me saying that, yeah, we've done a lot of bad shit in our lives, but none of this shit that we've done, none of the things that we've done actually define who we truly are. They're just poor decisions or subconscious or just things that have happened that we may not have been aware of, or we may have been trying to make up for because there was something else missing in our lives. So on that point, I'm going to move forward. But before I do, there's a couple of things that I just want to acknowledge up front. I don't want this just to be seen as, I've had this doom and gloom life. I've actually had a very privileged life and I've had a wonderful life. At no point through my life growing up have I ever been without. I've got amazing friends, amazing work colleagues, always had food on the table, always had shelter, always been able to go on holidays. So I've had a simply amazing life. I've seen a lot of Australia. I've seen a lot of other countries, and it's just amazing. I'd also like to kick off by thanking my mum, my two brothers, Darren and Shane, my gorgeous, beautiful queen, Jackie, and my two kids who I think are just simply amazing, Talia and Zach. And also recognising Zach's girlfriend, Georgia, who's moved in and lived with us for the last probably 12 odd months, if not longer. And they're just such beautiful people. And they are my reason for doing this. They are the reason for why I'm transforming. And also a lot of the reason why I ended up giving up one of my key addictions that I'll talk to. I just want to let them all know that I do love everyone endlessly. And as I said before, if it wasn't for them, I certainly wouldn't be who I am today. The other person I want to acknowledge is my dad. My dad passed away. This is the emotional piece that comes out. My dad passed away around 3 years ago. He was an amazing man. I just loved him, and I miss not being able to see my dad and being able to talk to him like we used to. I used to always look up to my dad. He had the ability to always get things done. He had this most wonderful creative mind and this beautiful pair of hands that could turn any piece of wood into some of the most amazing craft you've ever seen. I wish I'd had a chance, and I think we all say this, I wish I had a chance to spend more time with my dad, to be closer to my dad as I grew up. Sadly, through some of the things I'll talk through, there was probably some elements that over the years kept us apart emotionally. We did make up for that later on in life, but it was way too late for that. And, there are some parts that I look back and, I wish I had done a lot earlier. So a shout out to my dad. I know he'd be super proud of what I'm doing. I also know that he'd just be, telling people, and he used to. He never talked to me a lot, but through my mum, I knew that he would always tell others about what I'm doing and how successful I am and how good life is for me. And he was just super proud. Having said that, there's probably parts of this content of this podcast that he would look at me and he would shake his head. Dad had the great ability to pierce through you with a look that would make you shudder. And there's a trait that I have that's rubbed off on me that I feel my kids feel the same way. So in this episode, now I've got a reasonable amount of the emotion out of the way. And I'm not apologising for that at all, because as men, as people in today's society, we don't give ourselves permission to openly express our emotions and be upset in front of others. So I'm not unapologetic for any of the emotion that will come out through this podcast. So for me, I'm intending to open up a lot about my vices, my shames, and the guilt that I've carried over the past 50 odd years. But I think the key thing to remember as I'm going through this, that none of this defines me. I'm not defined by this. I do take full accountability for it. And absolutely, I acknowledge everything that I've done because I did it. No one else did it. It was me. What I have learned, though, is I've learned to forgive myself for those things. And where appropriate, I've gone out to those others who I believe I've impacted, and I've asked for their forgiveness as well. And then as I go along this journey, I'll continue to dig deep and uncover who the true person that I am. What is this person that is deep in me? What was my true purpose of why I'm here? And I'll continue to dig into that, which is ultimately the theme of the Unearthed Man. The Unearthed Man's about digging deep into that conditioning, to that hurt, that pain, that guilt, that approach, that style, understanding why it's there, why we triggered, and in understanding that, deal with it, and then be able to move on. So that's what I'm all about. The approach to this podcast, I struggled a bit. There's two ways of going about it. I could go back and go from day born all the way up to the 50 odd years and recall different factors and stories, or I could pick it up by theme. In the end, I felt that it's probably easier and simpler to work through each of these areas of the challenge and the shame, probably by the theme that I've had. So based on that, I'll be talking to what growing up looked like for me, what school life looked like for me, work and the relationships I've had, both with work and personal relationships, sport, the introduction to sport and the impact that sports had on my life, and then I'll finish off talking about the addictions that I have. I have an addictive personality, no doubt about that. There's certainly a history through my family, back through uncles, grandparents, where there's clearly been a lot of addictions, and probably a lot of addictions still within my family. Some people willing to admit to them and some others, but the reality is, it's up to each individual as to what they do. So to my mum, I love you. To my brothers, I love you. To my family, I do love you. And to any of my work colleagues who choose to listen in on this, this has been me all along. All of these things I talk about happened in the past, but I'd suggest there are a lot of people who won't talk about these things, but happens in the background. So I just ask that in all our conversations moving forward, that we have an understanding about this is just someone being open and vulnerable. And if you feel like you need to judge me, then that's fine. I'm very comfortable with that because, as I said before, everything I talk about here, I own, I take accountability for. I know the impact it's had on my life and where it's got me today. So to that point, let's start to move into what this episode's all about. And the first area I want to talk about is growing up. So for me, I grew up, born in country Victoria, a small town of about 10,000 people, born into a Catholic family, and that's important, and I'll touch on that as well a little bit later on. I spent pretty much my first 18 years up until adulthood there. There was a couple of years where we moved to Melbourne. My dad went to Teachers College after deciding to stop being a carpenter. Lived out at Broadmeadows. For those who know, in Melbourne, it's probably one of the rougher areas in Melbourne. Lived there for a couple of years, but that was 0 years to 2 years for me, so there's very little I can think about that. For a bit of context, both my mum and dad, my mum left home when she was 16, alcoholic father, alcoholic mother, wasn't a great environment for her to grow up in, not a lot of affection. My mum was out of home very early and had to fend for herself. And when you're in that situation, you have to, I think there are elements that you drop. And unfortunately, my mum is such a loving, caring, beautiful person who herself craves emotion. Probably missed that all her life. And, partly that's reflected now into myself. And same as my dad. My grandfather actually fought in Gallipoli. The famous movie Gallipoli, where it's called the Battle of the Neck. My grandfather fought there and he was injured, so he did survive, luckily, because then he came back to obviously have my dad and pass on the heritage. But my dad having a father who come back from the war, who was very emotionally battle scarred or scarred from that war, laid little to no affection on my dad. And also, there's a reasonable age gap between my dad and his next, his sister, who was just older than him. And so, dad, again, from a young age, really had to fend for himself. Most of his brothers had left home while dad was still young. So I understand where my parents came from, and that sort of produced a very challenging life for them. and part of that rolled down into us. So from a parenting approach, their approach was more about discipline than emotion. So, there was probably some, toughen up, harden up, get on with it. Definitely growing up in an age where corporal punishment was still accepted. There was the threat of straps or wooden spoons. Now, my dad never used a strap on us, ever, but it was in the drawer. So the threat was always there. And, when you grow up like that, there's challenges that come with that. I am the middle of two brothers, so there's three boys that I grew up. So when you're raising a family of three boys and you're the middle child, that in itself just drives a very masculine, competitive environment, which is I still operate today. I'm an extremely competitive person. My whole childhood with my two brothers just seemed like ongoing competition, no matter what it was, academic, sporting, picket, girlfriends, anything. It was always competitive between all of us, and particularly between myself and my older brother. That was something that I felt that I was always extremely competitive with. If my older brother won best and fairest, if he won any other competition, then that was a target. Not only would I try and win that best and fairest, but I'd try and win it twice or three times. Which, on the other aspect, is, that's the respect I showed to him without talking to him about it. That's how much I admired him. He inspired me because he was successful at these things, and his success drove my success. But there are costs that come to that competitiveness. I always felt that I was taking on not one brother but two brothers. My two brothers formed a very close relationship. I think it's that example of the older brother protecting the younger brother. I felt like I was in the middle, so whenever there was stuff happening, it always felt there was 2-on-1, and I was always willing to take 2-on-1, but that became challenging, that's for sure. There's a few things that I do distinctly remember growing up with my brothers, and that was there's just a lot of rage and anger. A lot of times it was all good, but at times there would just be, me just getting angry and feeling frustrated. And my older brother once described it. He said things would go well, but then when we looked and saw that your eyes turned red, we just knew to run. And so that would involve, me trying to find anything I could in the house. I used to have the plastic bowling ball and bowling the pins. I'd be throwing them as much as I could, with intent to hurt. There's no doubt about that. Myself, my older brother, as I said, I love him and I inspired him. But, again, with that competitive edge, I remember there were two distinct large fights that he had. First one was outside, and I actually got the better of him. I had him in a full leg choke. Being a fit young guy, putting him in a leg choke, actually had him in a situation where he definitely was struggling to breathe, and he was on the verge of choking, which was not a great thing for him, and it was probably quite a scary experience. The second one, Mum and Dad were out. I think my younger brother, they might have gone with my younger brother off for some concert or something, and he and I got in this fight, and I think he decided that enough was enough, and rather than defending himself, my older brother decided to come on the attack, and he threw this cracking right punch. Took me right below the ear on the jaw, and to be honest, to this day, I've got memories of it because my right jaw still clicks, so kudos to your big brother. Nice punch, probably put me back in my place. I think I was about 16 at that point in time, so certainly put me back in the place, but that's indicative of what life was around. The anger and frustration that I had, a lot of that was towards my dad, and I alluded to that earlier, that myself and my dad probably had an interesting relationship. I know he was always fully proud of me, but there was just a number of incidents that happened with my dad over the years that he and I finally cleaned up later on in life, but, for the ages of 13 to 17, we just never had a great relationship. It was a lot of frustration, a lot of yelling, a lot of swearing, a lot of name calling. And unfortunately, neither of us doubled back on that until probably a couple of years before my dad passed away. So I sat down and went back through a number of things that I've been carrying for 30-odd years. It was a rather relieving conversation for myself and my dad to have. He and I could never cuddle, never greet each other. If we saw each other, it'd be a handshake. After we sat down and had that open conversation, we were able to greet each other and hold and cuddle each other, which was just amazing. And I made the most of that in the last couple of years before he passed away. My parents laid out, as I was growing up, I always remember the 5 rules that they passed on to us. Don't get a tattoo. Don't ever get your ear pierced. Don't dye your hair. Don't have sex before marriage. And definitely do not get a girl pregnant outside of marriage. So in relation to that, I'm probably glad to say that I successfully broke all 5 rules. So I do have a tattoo. I did have my ear pierced. I did get my hair dyed. I did certainly have sex before marriage. And yes, I did get my now lovely wife. I've been married for 21 years. Yes, we were pregnant before we were married. And we still, have our gorgeous, beautiful, lovely Talia out of that. So I think that's one of those great things indicative of what I was told that I shouldn't do growing up. I always thought, well, if that's the rules, I'm probably going to rebel and find a way to go against that. I think when I look back over the relationship with my brothers, with my mum and my dad, all I ever wanted was love and affection. I just wanted my parents to hold me, just give me cuddles, and tell them that they love me. Not much more than that. As I said earlier, we never went without. We always had the practical things in life, all the food. Mum and Dad would take us to every sporting event we wanted to. Paid for us to go to school. We did everything. But for me, there was just some simple things in life is all I really wanted. So in when I spoke with my mum and dad about it, that they have a choice. We all have choices in life when we're parents. We could be friends with our children. We could decide just to be parents, disciplinarians. My mum and dad, who didn't know any different, took the parent disciplinarian approach. And because there was 3 boys, felt that if they gave one boy more affection than the other 2, that they just weren't being equal across the board. And I understand that. I think there's a saying that I love, and it is, there is nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. I never remember who said that, and so my apologies for the person who came up to that quote. And I think that's something to remember as we go through life. Every one of our children that are born different. So it is okay to treat them differently, as long as there's balance rather than equality, just balance in how that treatment. So they're all getting an even share of the right level of treatment. So if one needs affection, give affection. If one doesn't, then that's okay. Just work out what their needs are. When it comes to my 2 brothers, I still feel disconnected. I feel that as much as I love them and I would do anything for them, that over the years there is still a level of strain in the relationship. I know I hold a lot of account for that. I know that that is me holding them off, not them wanting to be part of my life. I acknowledged that with them at the back end of last year, spoke to them both about, the accountability I hold for that. And moving forward, 30, 40 years for us all to go. That's my definitely view of the world, that, our relationship will now continue to grow. Interestingly, my younger brother, I told him I'd start to hug him, and his response was, "No, man, we don't do hugs around here." But interestingly, now the last few times we've seen him, he himself is actually coming forward for the hug first, which is I love, and it's amazing. So thank you for that. It shows that doesn't matter how old we are or where we're at, we don't have to be stubborn. We can deep back in, and it might hurt to go back into those places, but that's where the growth is. That's where the healing is. And that's how we all get to move forward. So that covers off my growing up, my relationship with my parents, and my relationships with my brothers. So next part, let's move into the school aspect of my life. So what does school look like for me? As I alluded to, growing up Catholic, it was a Catholic primary and secondary school. My memories of primary school were fantastic. Loved primary school. It was just play, get out, do things, rode the bike to and from school, hung out within the playground. My best friend and my best man at my wedding, born 2 days after me in the same country town. We've been mates all our life. Two other my close mates I met at secondary school. One of my close mates through primary and secondary school, we've dropped off a bit. And again, that's probably more related to myself, but I'll talk a bit more to what took place in relation to that and part of the breakup for that a little bit later on, or the breaking apart. For me, school was good. Academically, I was always great. I never had an issue academically, but the challenge that led to, because I've got a very active mind, being able to get through school work quick in the classroom leaves an active mind very bored. So I used to find other ways, and often that would have me sent outside, sent to principal's office. And as I've alluded to, growing up the days of corporal punishment would actually also result in the occasional feather duster across the back of the bum. And I can tell you now, that fucking hurt. Feather dusters on asses, particularly when they don't whack horizontally, when they go vertical and effectively slice half your ass off, it does hurt. Secondary school, or the back end of primary school, my friends started to get girlfriends. You're all 11 and 12, getting interesting girls. I didn't get one. And I think that sort of started my feeling of my own doubts and my own validation and who I was. And, why wouldn't, if my mates had girlfriends, why wouldn't any girl like me? Why wouldn't they want to be have me as their boyfriend? There was one particular girl who still lives in Colac. She's a nurse. Hopefully she works out who this is if she listens to it. She was a beautiful girl. We used to share my friend Flickr books and those sorts of things, shared Easter eggs. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and she was such a beautiful, beautiful girl. So my apologies to her that maybe I didn't see her as being girlfriend potential. That was probably me being selective. So if you know who this is, my apologies. I love you. You are a beautiful person, and I love seeing what you do. My first experience in interaction with girls was around grade 6. I was playing the cornet, which is a little trumpet. I was doing that at the local marching band, but my dad, being a part of secondary school, I went across there to be part of their band. And over there, all of a sudden, there was high school kids, years 7 and 8, and girls. And I remember, mixing in with them. And we had to do an end-of-year school concert at secondary school, and the band got to sit at the back of the hall while we were waiting to play, and then after we played. And I was sitting beside these couple of girls, and they factually enticed me for my first kiss. Duck your head down behind the seat, have a kiss, and then that started off, I suppose the sexual sensations that I'll talk to later on. I remember them also touching me up, and I've only just remembered all this recently. And I'm not sure what to think of it, as to whether it was a compliment or whether I was just too young, and whether that just sent me down a path of sort of not knowing what was actually happening. Through that period as well, that sort of led you into, going into secondary school. Puberty kicked in, and I'd already had some of those interactions with some girls, but not really knowing what it meant or what it looked like. Secondary school come along. For the first, where I went, they decided to have a separate boys class, a separate girls class, and they had actually one mixed class, and my best mate ended up in the mixed class. And interestingly, he learned to deal and be around girls much better than what I did. I found that, the boys, for us, it was every opportunity we can to show off in front of the girls, and maybe that's just natural and what you would normally do. But we would do things like deliberately get in trouble so that we would actually have to go into the teacher's office, which in that stage was in the science area, science lab, and we knew the girls would be doing biology, and we would deliberately work out how to get hit by our teachers. The girls would hear us getting hit by canes and feather dusters, and we'd walk out as if we're super macho and look at us really cool people. It's the only way I knew to interact and mix with the girls. It was the only way I sort of felt it. It was the bravado approach. I didn't know how to talk to them. I didn't know how to not sexualize them. And so I had a very confused, probably years 13 to 18. Part of that confusion, and particularly when you get to 15, 16, was around, I just was so sexually active. I'll talk to later about that when I get into the addictions, but I was just superly sexually charged. What that meant was I tended to then sort of go, at that stage, sort of go girlfriend to girlfriend to girlfriend. What I later found out was one of my nicknames amongst the girls, and this is probably some of the guilt and shame I still carry, was sleazy wine bars. So it's sort of tough when you're not aware of that, but a close female friend, and I thank her today for opening up about that, but she said that that was the nickname I had. And it's because I never understood. I didn't understand what was going on with me. I didn't understand what was happening. So, going through a co-ed school where you spent the first 3 years of secondary school effectively in a boys' class, and then you mixed in with the other girls, and puberty, everything kicked in. It was pretty tough. The other thing at school was, you form really good close mates and close friends, and there was 2 or 3 of us who were part of a nice little gang. We'd hang out together, and we were pretty much inseparable. A few of us that went from primary school across to secondary school, we were just effectively completely inseparable. As a result of that, what would then happen is later on, with my close mate, he ended up going off to the army. He would come back on weekends, and he would be drunk as a skunk, and so was I. But I felt that he always then just wanted to fight me and battle me. And in the end, I just had to disconnect from him because I just couldn't handle the person he had become, and I probably haven't opened up to him about that. So I think you know who you are, and if you listen to this, again, I apologise, and maybe we'll look to make up at some point in time. So school for me there was challenges, but not academically, but more the mixing. From a work front, I left home at 18, straight out the door, straight into work. and just worked in many locations across country Victoria before settling into Melbourne. Work is one thing that I'm extremely proud of because it is something I'm just damn good at, and it's not meant to be arrogant. It's just confident in who I am and my capabilities. So I know I'm actually good at what I do, and that's probably indicative from people asking me to continually to come and work on challenging items and challenging projects. I think I'll cover a lot of work stuff off in a later podcast. But having said that, there's one thing that always underlies with me is there is still a level of seeking validation. There is still definitely a lot of people pleasing that happens with me in the workplace, always trying to take on more than what I should, purely because if I do, then I'll get the recognition that I think I should be getting and get all those pats on the back. And that doesn't do me any favours, because what it does do is it actually leads to a reverse level of self-worth, that I feel if I don't do all these things that I'm not worthy, and at a drop of a hat someone will say, we don't need you anymore. So definitely challenges that I've had in the workplace. Probably one of the biggest things that I've challenged with is I've never formed really close friendships with anyone I've worked with. I've certainly formed friendships, and there are certainly people that I will have interacted with and will continually interact with, where I've made friends. But I've never allowed myself to open up to really true, deep friendships with people in the workplace. That's changing now. There are definitely some people now who I'm closer to, I'm definitely interacting with and becoming more personal with as I'm willing to open myself up. They were willing to walk into that open space and also become my friends. And I'm loving that. And so, like anything, it's not too late in life to get to that point where you can have true, open, loving relationships within a workplace and also outside of that. The next area I want to cover on is my actual relationships. So I've been in and out of relationships constantly since high school. I never really did one-night stands. I always sought for that relationship. I always wanted to be part of a relationship, and I think that's because I always put my self-worth into the other person. I always attached myself to others. So if I was in a relationship, then I was worthy. And so that had me definitely jumping in and out. But what that also saw me doing was, in some cases, having crossed over relationships where I would start a new relationship before I actually closed out the last relationship, because there was a girl that was more exciting, something different about her, something else that was going on that maybe I wasn't getting in my previous relationship. So rather than just being open and honest and being a man, I just rolled, in some cases, relationship to relationship. Then there were points of time where I just was not in a relationship, and that was really hard and challenging. I would go out and I would see my friends easily, go on dates, being in relationships, long-term relationships, and finding it quite easy. And I would go out and just effectively just be the wingman, just be there, just trying to find someone that was out there for me. It sort of got to the point where a conversation with my mum would go like this on a Friday night. Hey, Stephen, how you doing? Yeah, good, thanks, Mum. How are you? Yeah, I'm really well. She goes, so what's up to this weekend? You know what, Mum? I think I might go out and try and find my wife this weekend. And, that went on weekend after weekend. The good news is that 24 years ago, that did happen. I did get to meet my soul mate, my beautiful queen. I knew the moment I met her that I loved her, that I was going to love her, and that we were meant to be together. And we have now. Now our relationship has had its challenges. Certainly some deep challenges, and there's a number of that has got to do with myself and my addictions. But there's also some challenges due to my queen and and what she has brought into the relationship. But the good thing is that people wonder why we've survived, and it's because we've always talked. We've always communicated. We've always worked through every little element that's actually happened in our relationship. There's been nothing we haven't spoken about. I think people would be surprised at the conversations that do take place even now, we rarely watch television. We spend hours just talking about where we're at, what happens, what's next. We go for walks together, and our relationship now is more beautiful than it ever has been. And I can't wait for seeing where it's going to go next 20, 30, 40 years of just living this beautiful life together. Just being soulmates is such an amazing piece. What I have learned now is I'm not codependent on my queen. I am now dependent. In upcoming episodes, I'll talk about some of the things that will happen or have happened or have been indicative that up to a certain point in time I was fully dependent on my wife, but certainly now we're both comfortably moving to a level of individuality but maintaining our beautiful relationship, and that's just an amazing place to be in. The other last piece before I get into addictions is sport. I've always played sport. Sport's been an immense impact on myself, positive and probably from a negative aspect too. So positive is fit, healthy. I know how to be healthy. I know what fit looks like. I never let my body get too far down. I always carry a bit of tub here and there, but in general terms, I've always maintained a good level of fitness, and I know the importance of that to my life and to my mental health. But sport for me also showed some darker sides and some shadow sides. So, I started playing senior baseball at the age of 13. That opened my eyes to drinking and a partying lifestyle at a very early age. So I remember finish a game of junior baseball, you're 13, you would then hop in a car, 2 or 3 carloads of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. We would then drive to Geelong to play baseball. They'd be drinking and smoking on the way up. They'd be drinking after the game, and then we'd all drive home again. No wonder my mum used to shake every time we hopped in the car. But that was life as I just learnt it, and life as it was. That was, for me, that's what sport was about. It was, play hard, party hard. And, I did that over the years, and that probably led to a lot of, why I was addicted, but also, sporting clubs become a great opportunity to fulfill your drinking needs and some of the other addiction needs. The other thing with the addictive personality, which I think is a positive out there, is I've channeled a lot of that addictive energy into doing large challenges. So I've run marathons, I've paddled marathons, I've ridden 200 odd K bike rides. And all that's because, I channel my energy now into see a mountain, climb a mountain, and then, look for the next mountain. What I am learning to do now, though, is not just climb it, but do it slowly. Enjoy the journey along the way so that it is there. But certainly, if you're always chasing and you think that the happiness sits at the top of the mountain, which I used to, and you get to the top of the mountain and it wasn't there, then you just keep chasing something. You're just out there always externalizing, and it's been very reflective in myself and my life and what's happened. So sport, it's been a huge positive in my life, but there are definitely some negatives that have come along with that. The last and final sessions that I really want to talk into is a bit about addictions and my vices. I've probably shown up for me in 3 areas. A lot of materialistic items, so a lot of externalizing, certainly around alcohol, and definitely in the area of pornography and masturbation. So materialistically, I've collected every watch since I was 10. I probably got 20, 30 odd watches. I even have a $3,500 watch that I just never wear. I have that many headphones, it's not funny. I always buy the latest audio equipment. My clothing's branded, and from when mobile phones were coming out, I was buying them. It was all status symbol. Status symbol. It was all external. My addiction was if I looked good if I had the right watch, if I had all the latest funky gear, that people would like me, that my life was attached to the materialistic items that I actually owned. And interestingly, there's no happiness, no satisfaction. No one cared like I cared. And I mean, I love to dress nice. So nothing wrong with dressing nicely, but as long as you're doing it for all the right reasons, and I'd spent most of my life doing it for all the wrong reasons. My other vice is alcohol. I had my first drink at the age of 15, which I know, it's probably even old for some others that have done it. Myself and a friend, we set up a tent in the backyard. He stole grog out of his parents' alcohol cupboard. I stole out of mine, and we just sat down one night and just drank in this tent in the backyard. The first time I ever tasted stout, it was horrendous. But from that point on, I just was addicted. I couldn't get myself off the alcohol. To the point where I can remember going on school excursion, ducking home and making up a horrendous cocktail. It had nearly every alcohol I could find in the cupboard, but took small portions out so that mum and dad didn't think they would see anything missing. Mix it with ginger ale and took it back, and we consumed that. And in particular, one of my other school friends, his dad caught him, and his dad banned him from actually hanging out with me because I was the influence of his son getting drunk, and he's probably right. So I apologise to him for that. He'll remember this as well, so I apologise. I've had many, many nights of just binge drinking. The Friday night before my 21st birthday party, I couldn't drink at my 21st because I'd written myself so badly off on the Friday night that when I actually got to my 21st, I was actually drinking soft drink. Everyone's wondering what was going on. It's because I just couldn't drink. I remember one night going out with my friends, getting cheap drinks, coming home. The way my bed was set up, I shared a room with my younger brother, and it was bunk beds, but it was sort of more like my feet were over the top of his feet. I remember wake up in the night just vomiting, and it was effectively like a waterfall going over the top of my bed onto my poor brother that was sleeping underneath me. Just a terrible experience. My 30th birthday, which was also when we did the christening of my daughter, that was on the Sunday. My family were up, people around. I got so drunk. It was ridiculous. There was a police incident that night, police helicopters and everything going on. I can't even remember that happening. That's how drunk I was when I woke up the next day, and then had to try and front up to the baptism of my daughter, and that just wasn't a great experience. My Bucks party, I woke up handcuffed to a washing basket in my bedroom. That's, again, can't even remember that happening. I've had to take 6 days off, just being too hungover. I've had a situation where I started drinking on a Friday night and finished at 2 a.m. on a Monday morning, and then picked up at 6 a.m. to be taken to a work conference, still well and truly smashed. So drinking for me just wasn't on. I'll talk in later episodes about how I moved off it, but I made a decision 17 years ago that I would stop. New Year's Eve 2002 going to 2003 was my last drinks, and I'm happy to say that I have been sober ever since. So I'm now 17 years sober, but the alcohol was just a horrible demon for me. It took me to 2007 to actually say I am an alcoholic, and so I refer to myself now as a sober alcoholic. I don't want to try and touch it again because I don't know how or what that would look like for my addictive personality. So to all those people that I've affected, impacted, insulted, abused, got angry at, had fights with, I deeply apologise. It was the cause of the breakup of my engagement, which I didn't cover off in the relationships. I was engaged for 18 months. Most of that time I was drunk. The beautiful lady that I was engaged to, she didn't deserve any of that. There was just a lot of arguments and a lot of fights. And, as I said, for anybody that I have offended over the years, which I know there are many, many people, I deeply apologise. It's no excuse because they were my words, they were my actions. Yes, they were alcohol induced, but as per anything, there's no excuse and I have full accountability. The last thing I want to touch on is around my other addiction, and that leads into some of the challenges I had at school, which is around pornography and masturbation. So the masturbation came first. I remember my first ejaculation at the age of 12. It was not planned. I was on a couch with my neighbour, a young girl, and we're just playing around, and I get aroused, and next thing I know, I've ejaculated, and I'm like, what that's all about. Didn't know anything about it. I think I'd read a book, when I grow up or something like that. But yeah, it just, from my first erection and my first ejaculation, and then when I first learned to masturbate, I was hooked. The dopamine hit, the sensation that comes from it. And when you live in a world of externalization and you live in a world of chasing that external happiness, then, that's where it lies. It lies exactly in that chasing, that short-term hit, and that's where it's at for me. So I feel sorry for my mum. My teenage years growing up, the sheets were definitely soiled on a very regular occasion. And my mum, would get my sheets and wash my sheets, and she clearly knew what was going on. But again, in a Catholic family where sex was embarrassing to talk about, where no one would ever say anything about it, my mum probably just washed them and got on with it, rather than sitting down and having a conversation about what was taking place. And I'll admit, I haven't even done that with my own kids. So it's a carry on from parents to parents about the embarrassment we have of having these conversations with our kids about masturbation and what it is and why they feel they need to do it and what comes out of it and what it looks like. And particularly for men, there is a difference with women when it comes to self-pleasure. There's a lot of research around the goodness for women in learning to drop into their body and loving and having that sensation with their body. For men, it's not. There's a lot of unhealthiness about it for men, particularly around where our energy sources come from. And a lot of the men's energy source comes from that groin area, and we waste that energy by just throwing it away everywhere we want to, as opposed to re-tapping into that energy and using it everywhere else. So, for me, I masturbated 40 odd years of my life. I haven't now for 7 months. I'm very proud of that. I made, again, a conscious decision, and I'll continue to move forward on that. The other one that's for me was pornography. I remember going on an end-of-season trip, probably at the ages of 18, 19, and these guys put on, yes, I'm old enough to know VHS tapes, and just watching what was going on there. But I had to sit there embarrassed. I couldn't get up because you're on a houseboat, holiday men, and you're sitting there as an 18-year-old with an erection. You're not going to get up and walk around. The humility that would have come from that, but the embarrassment and shame and guilt of just sitting there through that was also bad. But again, I was hooked. So I've gone through the VHS days, the DVD days, and up into online. Again, similar to the masturbation, hand in hand, I've committed to never watch pornography again. It is dramatically unhealthy. It triggers off sensations in your brain equivalent to what a drug or a cocaine hit would do for you. So what happens is that when you get addicted into it and you start to feel that sensation, you want to go and chase the hit. So you go out and you start watching more and more. The side effects for men of pornography and masturbation are not great. They spend the time objectifying women, spend time premature ejaculation, troubles in the bed, a lot of shame and guilt that sits in there because it's always hidden. It's always a dark secret. So, I admit to having all of those dark secrets, and I know what that has done to me, and I know that's where that's coming from. But as I've said now, having been out of that path for 7 months, I'm now on a journey about rediscovering me, my sexuality, my sexual practices. I'm learning more about tantric practices and all the positive aspects that come along with it. And so, that's a beautiful spot to be in. The last area, so that pretty much is my vices and my story. So what is that? What's the common themes that come out of that? Ultimately, all my life I've been nothing but a people pleaser. It's okay to want to provide service to people, but if you're saying yes to everybody all the time, you just can't do it because you attach all your self-worth and everything you do into other people. I spent my whole life being angry and frustrated up until November last year, where I had effectively an experience that allowed all that anger and frustration to release. And ever since then, I've been in a much more calmer, peaceful space. And so, we hold all these things, that anger and frustration is just all that shame and guilt that I've held in all those years about not getting affection and not feeling good enough and, always feeling in competition. You store that up. And if you're not regularly releasing it, it's just unhealthy. I've lived with a life of fearing rejection, which I spoke through. I've always sought validation for who I am. That's changed now. I know who I am. I don't need to be validated. If you're not comfortable with who I am, then I'm happy to talk to what's happening with you. But I certainly know who I am. And I just spent my whole life just wanting to be liked by my work colleagues, liked by my school friends, and generally trusting that when someone says they like me, that that they're actually true to that. So to round out the episode, that's it. As I said, there was a bit of emotion in there, particularly when it comes to my mum and my dad and my family. There's a lot there. There's a lot of emotion with my wife and my kids. But that's who I am now. I am now an emotional guy. So look, I know some of all that I spoke through sounds bleak and that I had a life full of struggles and challenges. But as I said earlier, I've had a great life. There's just a number of challenges along the way that I've decided to open up about and share on this podcast. Because as I've indicated, I think for others to go there, I needed to go there first. And I'd be surprised if there's many other men out there who, if they're willing to have a deep look inside them, would not go, yeah, in fact, I'm probably a bit the same way and I now need to change as well. I hid all that due to there was just shame and guilt, but there's nothing to be shame and guilty about. It's not the man who I am. I don't want to hold on to any of that shame and guilt anymore. I want it to be released. I want it to be out there. As I've said earlier, none of what I've spoken about actually defines me, who I am. It's not the true person I am. It's the conditioning that's sat around me. And it's all the decisions that haven't been great, but doesn't mean that is in depth who I am. So I know who I am and I know where that lies. I've forgiven myself. And as I said before, I apologize to anyone else. And if you feel that I haven't forgiven you or I haven't apologized to you, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to apologize to you for what I've done. As alluded earlier, people may decide to judge me because of this. People may decide not to be friends, may not connect with me. That's okay. Thank you for being part of my life. And if you just choose to move on, then that's okay. I'm grateful for you. The only thing I would say is, what was it that triggered in you by me being open? Because if you've already known me, all these things were happening in the background anyway. So you probably knew the true me without knowing all these background things. So I'd suggest that rather than just completely disconnecting or judging me, that maybe we sit down and have a conversation about it. And I'm also open with that. What I'd like to finish on with is, as part of my journey, I've come up with my own personal creed. And I would like to read this out to you because this is now who I am. I am abundant. I am worthy of close, personal, trusting, loving relationships. I have clarity of mind and body. They are in harmony. I am connected to Mother Earth, Father Sky, and my inner playful child. So that's who I am. So thank you for listening. As a reminder, you can reach me via Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just go search for The Unearthed Man. Reach out, connect, put comments on this podcast, subscribe to the podcast. The more subscribers I get, the better it is. It gets to the top of the charts. People can start to see it's out there, and they can start to say, hey, look, what an amazing journey this in. Don't forget to tune into episode 3 as I go on an amazing journey with a transformational coach, Blaze Grinner, where we talk more about some of the addictions. So for now, it's from me, much love and peace, The Unearthed Man.